Designed and produced in the Third Reich, this remotely controlled, unmanned ground vehicle featured armor plating, tank-like wheels and rollers, and the capacity to carry up to 100 kilograms of explosives.
An unusual mix of wheel and track appeared in the Kettenkrad, the tracked motorcycle of the German army.
The Second World War saw the creation of some of the most terrifying, innovative, and downright bizarre machines ever built.
Have you ever wondered what happened to the most disturbing machines Nazi Germany built? Not the tanks in museums, but the secret devices no one was meant to see.
This footage shows ground testing for a German Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet during World War II.
Machines tied to human experiments, chemical tests, and unexplained disappearances. Many were sealed in collapsing bunkers, dumped in deep forests, or hidden in tunnels that investigators still fear entering today. What has been found inside these machines is even worse. Stay with us as we expose 20 Nazi creations that should never have existed. Number 20. The Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter wreck. The Messerschmitt Me 262 was the first combat jet the world had ever seen, and Nazi Germany built it for one purpose:
the world's first operational jet aircraft by twin turbojet engines.
Overwhelm Allied pilots with speed so extreme they would never see the attack coming. It was a weapon meant to tear apart bomber formations before anyone had time to react. When it entered the skies, it moved faster than anything else in the war, and many Allied crews reported seeing only a blur before their aircraft exploded. But this speed came with deadly problems. The Me 262's jet engines were unstable, overheated constantly, and could fail without warning. Pilots were often forced to make emergency landings at full speed, and many jets simply tore themselves apart in flight.
Damaged flying over Munich, which was then reported lost in a crash upon landing at an airbase in Italy.
One crash site uncovered in the Netherlands decades later showed exactly how violent these failures were. Researchers found the Me 262 buried under thick soil, its fuselage crushed, its wings snapped, and its engines scattered in pieces. The lightweight metal frame that once gave it speed had crumpled like foil. The Jumo jet engines, Germany's most advanced technology, were found in twisted fragments, clear evidence of catastrophic mechanical failure. Inside the wreck, investigators recovered shattered cockpit instruments, broken gauges, smashed controls, and fragments of the throttle system. These pieces revealed how fragile the aircraft truly was.
It would still go down in history as the first jet encounter. It was a telling indictment.
Pilots had to fight constantly failing engines, overheating fuel lines, and controls that sometimes locked up mid-flight. Many never survived these failures. The Me 262 was a technological leap forward, but it was also a machine that killed its own pilots as often as it killed the enemy. The wreckage recovered in the Netherlands is a silent reminder of how unstable and deadly this jet truly was. 19. The Kugelpanzer ball tank.
The Second World War saw the creation of some of the most terrifying, innovative, and downright bizarre machines ever built.
The Kugelpanzer is one of the most disturbing and unexplained machines connected to Nazi Germany. Unlike the giant tanks meant to crush cities, this device was small, sealed, and shaped like a steel sphere. It had two massive side wheels and a tiny stabilizing wheel behind it. It looked less like a vehicle and more like a metal trap designed to swallow a man whole. Nothing else from the war resembles it, and that alone makes it unsettling. Only one survives today in the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia. What makes it truly frightening is the lack of information surrounding it.
This compact one-man vehicle looks like something out of a steampunk fever dream. It was just outright mysterious.
No reliable German documents, no verified blueprints, no clear explanation. It appears in history without context, as if its purpose was never meant to be written down at all. The Soviets captured it in Manchuria during the final days of the war, suggesting Nazi Germany secretly shipped it to Japan. But even that is uncertain. What happened inside this machine is completely unknown. Some experts say it was a recon vehicle, forcing a soldier to sit inside the tiny metal sphere and roll directly toward enemy fire with almost no room to move. Others argue it was built for cable laying under attack.
Inside the tank would have been a single crew member, and being able to fire a single machine gun through a slot underneath the viewing port,
pushing the operator to crawl inside and drag wiring across live battle zones, while shells and bullets smashed into the metal around them. The worst part, the museum refuses to let anyone open it. No one knows what remains inside the sealed chamber. Wiring, machinery, or something far worse. The Kugelpanzer sits locked, cold and untouched, hiding whatever truth it was built for. 18. The Landkreuzer P1000 Ratte.
To outproduce, out-armor, and outgun the capitalist West during the Second World War.
The Landkreuzer P1000 Ratte is one of the most extreme military concepts ever proposed. It was never built, but the idea alone shows how far Nazi Germany was willing to go in its search for giant weapons. The Ratte was planned to be the largest armored vehicle in human history. According to the surviving German design drawings, it would have weighed more than 1,000 tons, which is heavier than many small ships. Its length would have been greater than a modern house, and its height nearly as tall as a building with several floors. The design included 2 huge naval guns taken from warships, along with many smaller guns for protection against aircraft.
By 1945, it had evolved from a brutal fighting machine to a war-winning weapon.
It was expected to carry a crew of more than 20 people. To move such a giant, engineers suggested using multiple engines taken from submarines or possibly from U-boats. But as soon as German military planners looked more closely at the idea, serious problems became obvious. The Rat would have crushed most roads. No bridge in Europe could support its weight. Fueling it would have been nearly impossible. Even moving it a few kilometers would have required enormous effort and resources. In 1943, the project was officially cancelled because it was completely impractical. Still, the idea survived in military archives and sparked interest among historians.
There was really no push towards mechanization on the Eastern Front.
It is now seen as a symbol of late-war desperation, when Germany began imagining weapons that looked powerful on paper, but could never exist in real life. 17. The Panzerkampfwagen E-100 Super Heavy Tank.
There is another Super Heavy, often forgotten, which started its development around the same time as the Maus.
The Panzerkampfwagen E-100 was another German attempt to create a super heavy tank near the end of the war. Unlike the Ratte, which never left the drawing board, the E-100 reached real construction. A full steel hull was actually built in a factory before the project was stopped. The E-100 was designed to weigh more than 140 tons. This made it smaller than the Maus, but still extremely large for any tank of the time. The E-Series was planned as a group of armored vehicles that shared many parts, which would make repairs easier.
The development of the E-100 is by far one of the most interesting tank projects I've researched.
The E-100 was supposed to be the largest and strongest model in that series. The tank was planned to carry very thick armor and a powerful 150mm gun. Engineers also designed stronger suspension and wide tracks to help it move across soft ground. Even with these improvements, the tank would have been slow, heavy, and difficult to transport. It needed special rail cars and could not cross most bridges. When Allied forces captured the factory, they found the E-100 hull sitting unfinished. It had no turret, no engine, and many parts were missing. The British took the hull for study and later scrapped it. Today, the E-100 exists only in drawings, photos, and a few surviving pieces. It shows how Germany kept trying to build bigger and heavier tanks, even when the war was already turning against them. 16. The U-boat pens and the entombed submarines.
It is from one of the most secret places of the Second World War, hidden in the basements of Liverpool, that they will lead the Battle of the Atlantic.
During the war, Nazi Germany built massive concrete U-boat pens, structures so thick and reinforced that they were closer to underground prisons than naval bases. These bunkers were designed for one purpose: keep Germany's submarine fleet alive long enough to starve Britain and sink anything moving across the Atlantic. The walls were meters thick, packed with steel and concrete strong enough to absorb direct bombing without collapsing. Inside, engineers repaired torpedoes, loaded ammunition, and prepared submarines for attacks that killed thousands at sea. The most feared sites were the pens at Hamburg and the Elbe II bunker. These were not shelters. They were operational strongholds built to protect U-boats while they prepared for deadly missions.
The Nazis built gigantic bases on the French Atlantic coast to shelter the German submersibles.
Even when the Allies bombed them repeatedly, the bunkers barely cracked. When Germany began to fall apart, many U-boats couldn't escape. Crews sealed the entrances with explosives, trapping entire submarines inside to keep them out of Allied hands. Some U-boats were abandoned in flooded chambers. Others were left damaged, stripped, or partly dismantled. The exact number remains uncertain because wartime records were destroyed or never kept. Decades later, when historians and urban explorers managed to push into sealed sections, they found scenes that shocked them. Rusted engines still bolted in place, twisted torpedo racks, collapsed walkways, piles of corroded tools, and thick cables running across floors covered in black water. Some rooms were untouched since 1945, the air stale and silent. In flooded pens, dark shapes beneath the water turned out to be pieces of submarine hulls and machinery no one knew still existed. 15. Panther tanks recovered from rivers and swamps in Eastern Europe. The Panther was one of Germany's most important tanks during the Second World War. It was powerful, well-armored in the front, and carried a long and accurate 75mm gun. However, many Panther tanks never made it back from the battlefield. During retreats on the Eastern Front, some were abandoned in rivers, lakes, and deep marshland, as German forces tried to escape advancing Soviet troops. For many years, these tanks stayed hidden underwater. Mud, cold temperatures, and still water helped preserve many of them better than expected. Instead of rusting away completely, several Panthers remained in surprisingly solid condition. This made them valuable discoveries for historians. Most recoveries took place in countries such as Poland, Latvia, and Russia after the war ended. Local historians, divers, and sometimes farmers reported strange metal shapes beneath the water. Recovery teams often had to use heavy cranes, barges, or even special lifting balloons to raise these massive machines back to the surface. The process was slow and dangerous because the tanks were heavy and could break apart if not supported correctly. Inside the recovered Panthers, researchers sometimes found personal items from the crew, such as tools, empty shell cases, water bottles, notebooks, or even faded map pieces. These objects helped historians understand what the tank crews experienced during the final months of the war. Some tanks also showed signs of battle damage, including holes from shells or shrapnel. Once removed from the water, many Panther tanks were taken to restoration workshops. Experts cleaned the metal, repaired missing parts, and sometimes rebuilt the tank so it could be displayed in a museum. Even when the tanks could not be fully restored, their parts were saved for study or used to help restore other surviving Panthers. 14. Panzer VIII, Mau's super heavy tank. The Panzer VIII. Maus was not designed as a tank. It was designed as a steel giant meant to crush anything in its path. Nazi engineers built it at a point in the war when desperation pushed them toward machines built purely for destruction. The Maus was meant to survive direct hits from every Allied weapon. Its purpose was simple and terrifying: keep moving forward while everything in front of it died. It weighed nearly 190 tons, a number that makes normal tanks look fragile. Its armor was so thick that most shells would shatter on impact. The main gun could destroy vehicles 2 kilometers away with a single hit. Standing beside the Maus feels less like looking at a weapon and more like facing a concrete bunker shaped into a monster. But the same scale that made it deadly also made it nearly useless. It crushed roads, snapped bridges, burned enormous fuel supplies, and moved slower than a marching soldier. The engine strained under its weight, often failing before it even reached testing speed. Only 2 hulls were built, and only 1 turret was completed. When the Soviets overran Germany, they found the shattered remains of the project. They bolted together one functional unit, a grim reminder of how far the Nazis were willing to go. Today, it sits in the Kubinka Tank Museum, silent proof of a machine built for devastation on a scale war had never seen. 13. The Nazi Gold Train of Wałbrzych, Poland. The story of the Nazi Gold Train is one of the most famous wartime legends in Europe. According to the tale, a secret armored train loaded with gold, artwork, and valuable items was hidden in underground tunnels near the city of Wałbrzych in Poland during the final days of the Second World War.
Tale is that in 1945, the Nazis filled a train with up to 300 tons of gold, jewels, and masterpieces.
Many people believe the train was sent away as Soviet forces advanced, and that it disappeared before it could be captured. For decades, the story remained a mystery. Local residents passed down rumors about sealed tunnels, blocked entrances, and railway tracks that seemed to lead nowhere. Some people claimed that German troops hid the train inside a mountain tunnel and collapsed the entrance to keep it out of Allied hands. However, none of these claims were confirmed through wartime documents. The story became world famous in the year 2015.
Drove it into secret tunnels in an area of Germany, which is now part of Poland.
When two treasure hunters announced that they had found signs of a buried train using ground-scanning radar. Their discovery received international attention. Journalists, historians, and curious visitors all wanted to know if the legendary train had finally been found. Polish authorities organized careful investigations of the area. Excavations and new scans were carried out by scientific teams. They studied the site in great detail, looking for tunnels, tracks, or any solid evidence of a hidden train. However, the results were clear. No train was found. The radar images that started the excitement were likely caused by natural soil layers or underground rocks. Even though the gold train has never been proven to exist, the legend continues to captivate many people. It reflects a real historical truth. During the final days of the war, German forces did transport valuable items and records to secret locations to keep them from being captured. Because of this, stories about hidden treasure do not seem impossible. They simply remain unconfirmed. 12. The Ferdinand tank destroyer. The Ferdinand tank destroyer was built for one purpose. It was created to kill tanks before their crews ever saw what hit them. German engineers took the heavy Porsche Tiger chassis, which had already proven unstable, and rebuilt it into a machine designed to destroy Soviet armor from extreme distances. The Ferdinand carried the 88mm PaK-43 gun, a weapon that could punch through enemy tanks so violently that crews were sometimes found still sitting in their positions, killed instantly by the blast that ripped through the steel. Its front armor was so thick that many Soviet gunners reported their shells bouncing off without leaving dents. Crews hiding in trenches or behind wrecks described hearing the Ferdinand's cannon fire and feeling the ground shake as tanks in front of them exploded in seconds. On open ground, the Ferdinand created scenes of complete panic. Soviet formations broke apart because vehicles were destroyed before they even entered firing range. The terror it caused did not hide its fatal weaknesses. The machine was extremely heavy. Its engines overheated and stalled. The vehicle lacked a forward machine gun during its first deployment, which made it easy for infantry to climb onto the hull and attack the crew at close range. Many Ferdinands were abandoned after their engines failed or after mines ripped apart their tracks. Crews often destroyed their own vehicles to prevent capture because they knew what would happen if infantry swarmed them. The Ferdinand was first used at the Battle of Kursk in 1943. It destroyed large numbers of Soviet tanks at long range. It also suffered heavy losses when mines, engine failures, and close-range attacks overwhelmed it. After Kursk, German engineers added a machine gun, changed the armor layout, and improved the design. The upgraded version was renamed the Elephant.
Many people call it the Elephant. Its original name was the Ferdinand, and that was really the name the Germans used for it most of the war.
A small number fought in the East and in Italy during the final years of the war. Despite being unreliable and difficult to maintain, the vehicle remained feared for its ability to destroy tanks from distances where other weapons failed. Only two survive today. One stands in the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia. The other remains at the United States Army Ordnance Museum. 11. Tiger tanks lost in lakes and marshes. The Tiger tank was one of the most feared German vehicles of the Second World War. Its heavy armor and powerful 88mm gun made it a serious threat to Allied forces. Because of its reputation, many stories grew over the years about Tigers sinking into lakes or disappearing into deep marshland during the last months of the war. Some of these stories are based on real events. During retreats on the Eastern Front, heavy vehicles often became stuck in mud, snow, or soft ground. When a Tiger could not be freed, the crews sometimes had to abandon it. In some places, tanks slid into rivers or low-lying wet areas during the confusion of battle. However, many of the dramatic tales about whole Tigers resting on lake bottoms have never been proven. Careful research and museum records show that very few Tiger wrecks have been found in water, and no large number of complete Tigers has ever been raised from lakes. Most confirmed recoveries involve other types of German tanks or self-propelled guns. Even so, smaller Tiger parts have been discovered in former battlefields. Wheels, armor plates, and other fragments have been dug up from soil and riverbanks in areas where Tiger units once fought.
New and complex technologies had to be introduced due to the Tiger's large size.
These pieces help historians confirm where the tanks were used and sometimes how they were lost. The real story is less about secret treasure at the bottom of lakes and more about the hard reality of war. The Tiger was powerful, but it was also very heavy and difficult to move. In bad weather and rough terrain, it could become a problem for its own crew. When fuel was low, bridges were destroyed, or enemy forces closed in, even the strongest tank could be left behind. The surviving remains of Tiger tanks, whether in museums or still in the ground, remind us that every famous machine also has limits. They show how technology, terrain, and human decisions all came together in the final, desperate years of the conflict. 10. The Messerschmitt Me 163 Comet rocket fighter wrecks.
This footage shows ground testing for a German Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet during World War II.
The Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet was one of the most unusual aircraft ever flown during the Second World War. It used a rocket engine, not a jet engine, which allowed it to climb extremely fast and reach speeds no other aircraft of the time could match. But this speed came with serious risks. The rocket fuel was dangerous to handle, the flight time was very short, and landing was difficult because the Komet used a simple skid instead of regular landing gear. After the war, several Komet wrecks were found at old airfields and crash sites in Germany. These remains showed how small and lightweight the aircraft was and how its design focused entirely on speed rather than safety or endurance. Some pieces revealed scorch marks from fuel leaks or hard landings. 9. The Schienenwolf railway plow. The Schienenwolf was one of the simplest yet most destructive tools used by German forces during the Second World War.
As German forces faced the threat of advancing Allied and Soviet troops.
Its name means rail wolf, and it was designed for one purpose: to destroy railway tracks during a retreat. The machine was nothing more than a heavy rail car fitted with a large metal plow or claw. When pulled behind a locomotive, the claw dug deep into the wooden ties and stones beneath the track. As the train moved forward, the claw ripped the rails out of place, bending and twisting the steel behind it. This made the track unusable for enemy trains. The Schienenwolf was used especially on the Eastern Front. When German forces were forced to withdraw, they wanted to slow down the Red Army. By destroying long stretches of track, they cut off Soviet supply routes and made the advance more difficult. Rebuilding the damage often took weeks because the rails were so badly torn apart. Unlike tanks or armored vehicles, the Schienenwolf had no armor, no guns, and no crew compartments. It was purely a tactical tool designed to cause as much infrastructure damage as possible in a short amount of time. Several versions were built, but all followed the same basic idea. Most Schienenwolf machines were removed, scrapped, or left behind after the war. However, one surprisingly complete example was found many years later inside a sealed railway tunnel in Poland. It was covered by debris and plants, but the claw was still attached to the frame and easy to recognize. 8. Sd.Kfz 2 Kettenkrad. The Sd.Kfz 2 Kettenkrad was one of the most unusual vehicles used by German forces during the Second World War.
An unusual mix of wheel and track appeared in the Kettenkrad, the tracked motorcycle of the German army.
It looked like a mix between a motorcycle and a small tracked vehicle. The front had a single motorcycle-style wheel, while the back used tracks similar to those on a tank. This design created a compact and highly mobile half-track that could travel across rough ground with ease. The Kettenkrad was originally built for airborne troops because it was small enough to fit inside transport aircraft. Once in service, it proved so useful that it was soon employed on many different fronts. It ran on a 1.5-liter Opel engine and was used for a wide range of tasks. It could tow light artillery, carry ammunition, lay communication cables, and move soldiers through terrain where larger vehicles would get stuck. Its ability to handle mud, snow, and steep slopes made it a valuable support vehicle. More than 8,000 Kettenkrads were produced between 1940 and 1944. Many years after the war, one abandoned Kettenkrad was discovered in a ruined farmhouse in northern France. It had been hidden under fallen roof beams and rubble, protected from the weather for decades. Although it was covered in dust and rust, much of the vehicle remained intact, including the tracks, engine cover, and front wheel. Historians believe it was left behind during a fast German retreat and simply forgotten as the fighting moved on. Restoration experts carefully removed it from the site and found that many of its original parts could still be saved. After a detailed restoration, the Kettenkrad was brought back to working condition and is now sometimes driven at historical reenactment events. 7. Goliath tracked mine. The Goliath tracked mine was one of the smallest and most unusual vehicles used by Germany during the Second World War. Officially called the Leichter Ladungsträger Goliath, it was basically a remote-controlled demolition machine. It looked like a tiny tank, but its job was not to fight. Its job was to explode.
Designed and produced in the Third Reich, this remotely controlled, unmanned ground vehicle featured armor plating, tank-like wheels and rollers.
The Goliath carried up to 100 kilograms of explosives. It was built by companies like Borgward and Zundap and came in both gasoline and electric-powered versions. A long wire, usually about 600 meters, connected the operator to the vehicle. Using a control box, the operator guided the Goliath toward a target, such as a tank, a bridge, or a bunker, and then triggered the explosion. The idea was clever, but the Goliath had weaknesses. It was slow, lightly armored, and could be stopped by simple gunfire. If the guidance wire broke or was cut, the machine became useless. Even so, thousands were built and used, especially on the Eastern Front and during the fighting in Normandy. One abandoned Goliath was found near Caen in France. It had sunk slightly into soft soil and was hidden by plants, which helped protect it from rust and scrap collectors. When it was dug up, the vehicle was still mostly complete. Bomb disposal teams safely removed what remained of the explosives before the Goliath was cleaned and placed in a local military museum. 6. Tatra T87.
Today we are driving a 1941 Tatra T87, one of the most influential cars ever made.
The Tatra T87 was one of the most advanced cars of its time, and it stood out sharply from the rough military vehicles used by Germany during the Second World War. Built in Czechoslovakia, it had a rear-mounted air-cooled V8 engine and a smooth, aerodynamic body that allowed it to travel long distances at high speed. This made it a popular choice for senior German officers who needed to move quickly across occupied territory. However, its speed became a problem. Many officers were unfamiliar with the car's lightweight design and unusual handling. The T-87 could reach high speeds easily, and this led to a surprising number of fatal accidents. The situation became so well known that some German units reportedly restricted how often the car could be used. After the war, damaged and abandoned T-87s were found in several countries, including Poland, Ukraine, and the former Czechoslovakia. Some were discovered wrecked in forests or left along roadsides during hurried retreats. Others survived in forgotten barns or fields, slowly rusting away. 5. Dornier Do 335 Pfeil. The Dornier Do 335 Pfeil, meaning arrow, was one of the fastest piston-engine aircraft Germany built during the Second World War. It used an unusual push-pull design, with one engine in the nose and another in the tail. This layout reduced drag and gave the aircraft remarkable speed, faster than many early jets built by the Allies. The Do 335 was created as a high-speed, heavy fighter. It could chase down enemy bombers or escape from most pursuers with ease. The aircraft carried advanced features for its time, including an ejection seat, tricycle landing gear, and automatic dive brakes. However, it entered service very late in the war, and only a small number were ever completed. After Germany surrendered, the Allies collected advanced German aircraft for study. One surviving Do 335 was shipped to the United States during Operation Seahorse. In the 1990s, the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum worked with the Dornier Company to restore this rare aircraft using original parts and historical records. Another incomplete Do 335 airframe was found in Bavaria in the 1970s, stored in an old Luftwaffe hangar. It was too damaged to save, but its remains confirmed that more aircraft were produced than the single surviving example. 4. Focke-Achgelis Fa-330 Bachstelze. The Focke-Achgelis Fa-330, nicknamed the Bachstelze or wagtail, was one of the strangest aviation devices used by Germany during the Second World War.
Beside the Storch is the smallest aircraft of World War II, the Focke-Achgelis Fa-330.
It was not a helicopter, but a small manned rotor kite, designed to be towed behind a U-boat. As the submarine moved forward on the surface, The airflow turned the rotor blades and lifted a single observer into the air. Once airborne, the FA-330 gave U-boat crews a much higher view of the surrounding ocean, sometimes up to 400 feet. This helped them spot ships or aircraft far beyond the normal range of eyesight from the deck. The device was lightweight, could be folded for storage, and could be launched or recovered quickly. But using the FA-330 came with a major risk. The U-boat had to stay on the surface while towing it, which made the submarine easy to detect and vulnerable to attack. Because of this danger, the rotor kite was used mainly in calmer, less patrolled areas such as the Indian Ocean. Around 200 FA-330s were built, but only a limited number were used in regular operations. After the war, most were dismantled or left behind. One nearly complete example was discovered in the 1970s in storage at a former Luftwaffe test site, still in its crate and never assembled. Its aluminum frame, canvas seat, and simple rotor system had survived in good condition.
The aircraft was inexpensive, made of plywood, fabric, and steel. A stick controlled the pitch and roll. Foot pedals moved a rudder.
Today, the FA-330 is extremely rare. Surviving examples can be seen in museums such as the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum and aviation collections in Germany and Britain. 3. The ghost plane of Iceland. Iceland's black sand beaches are famous for their dramatic beauty, but one of them hides something unexpected. Resting on the sand is the wreck of a U.S. cargo plane.
This is one exception. We're here at the wreckage of a Navy plane crash from the 1970s.
Often called the ghost plane of Iceland. Its empty metal shell looks like something from a movie, but it comes from a real event that took place on November 21, 1973. On that day, a C-117 aircraft carrying 5 crew members was flying toward a U.S. naval station in Iceland. As it approached the island, the weather suddenly turned severe. Temperatures dropped far below freezing, and powerful icy winds hit the plane. The cold caused serious engine trouble, and the pilots had no choice but to make an emergency landing on the beach. Incredibly, every person on board survived without injury. After the crash, U.S. military teams arrived to rescue the crew and salvage what they could. They removed the engines, the equipment, and the wings, leaving behind only the empty fuselage. For decades, the abandoned shell sat exposed to storms, sand, and harsh Arctic winds. Today, the wreck is one of Iceland's most visited landmarks. Tourists travel across long stretches of black sand to see the haunting remains up close. Even in its damaged state, the ghost plane stands as a striking reminder of survival and the power of nature. 2. Arado Ar-234, the first jet bomber. The Arado Ar-234 was the first jet-powered bomber to ever become fully operational. Built by Germany near the end of the Second World War, it used 2 jet engines that gave it incredible speed and made it much harder for enemy fighters to catch. Its smooth, narrow wings and sleek body showed how far aircraft design had advanced during the war. The Ar-234 was used mainly for fast reconnaissance flights and limited bombing missions. It could fly higher and faster than many Allied aircraft, which made it valuable for gathering information in the final stages of the conflict. However, because it arrived so late, only a small number were produced, and they had little effect on the war's outcome. After Germany surrendered, the Allies collected several advanced German aircraft for study. One surviving Ar-234 was taken to the United States and later preserved. Today, this rare jet bomber is displayed at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, where visitors can see the world's first operational jet bomber up close. The Ar-234 stands as a symbol of how quickly aviation technology was changing. Even though its time in the war was short, it helped shape the future of jet aircraft around the world. 1. U-3523 Type XXI submarine. Deep beneath the waters of the North Sea lies the wreck of U-3523, one of Germany's advanced Type XXI submarines from the final stage of the Second World War. These submarines were designed with cutting-edge electric systems, improved batteries, and a smooth, streamlined hull that allowed them to stay underwater far longer than earlier U-boats. Their technology made them harder to detect and far more capable of avoiding Allied patrols. U-3523 was built during Germany's desperate push to regain control of the seas. Its sudden disappearance near the end of the war led to decades of speculation. Some believed it was sunk while fleeing Allied forces. Others thought it might have tried to escape toward distant waters. Because no wreck had ever been found, its final moments remained a mystery. That changed in the year 2018, when researchers finally discovered the submarine resting on the seafloor in the Skagerrak Strait. Parts of the hull were still recognizable, and the shape of the vessel confirmed it was indeed U-3523. The evidence showed that it sank during a wartime transit rather than during a secret mission. Divers and researchers studied the wreck carefully, noting the advanced engineering that made Type 21 submarines some of the most impressive underwater machines of their time. The preserved sections of the hull offer a rare chance to understand how submarine warfare evolved during the war's final months. Today, U-3523 remains a haunting relic of German innovation under extreme pressure. For naval historians and enthusiasts, the wreck provides a powerful link to a hidden part of the war, showing both the technological ambitions and the desperation of the era.